let's talk about this federal system that the documentary attempts to explain as the reason behind Verwoerd's ideas on apartheid. South Africa was to be like Europe, according to the documentary, self-governing tribes developing on their own terms, whatever interpretation you have of that. It just seems puzzling that the black areas in this federal system was largely to be found in arid regions with little to no resources, and areas within white South Africa had countless ghettos which provided cheap, uneducated labor to whites.
Yeah, that was a problem. It didn't work. It failed. That's why the system failed.
X gon' give it to you. Fuck, wait for you to get it on your own. X gon' deliver to you. Knock, knock, open up the door, it's real. With the non-stop.
If you agree with the fact that apartheid was wrong, many are arguing that you're just trying to revise history and describe apartheid as a woolly concept.
Yeah, I think the point is this. This is something that I think Afrikaners in particular are still grappling with. Because I know many people, I knew people who worked for the apartheid government, and I know people who did who are still alive. And those people are not evil. And now you have to ask the question, if this was such an evil system, why are these people not evil? Or are they actually evil, but they're trying to hide it? And I think that the answer lies in the complexity of what happened. And we can say that a lot of evil things happened during apartheid, and we should say that, and we should acknowledge that. But we need to try and understand what happened, because if you try to understand, then we can learn from it more comprehensively.
They see me rolling, they hating, patrolling and trying to catch me riding dirty, trying to catch me riding dirty.
Some may argue even now that you're trying to sanitize the role that people played in the implementation of apartheid. It can be argued also after World War II that there were still people that operated within the Nazi system that operated in West Germany post-World War II. It doesn't excuse the fact that World War II happened, that Nazism was an evil system, and neither should it excuse that apartheid was an evil system too, and there were people that implemented it, not certainly against their will.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure what the question is there, but I think if the question is were there evil people, yes, there were. Did evil things happen? Yes, it did. Did injustices happen that need to be corrected? Yes, that's certainly the case. But we also need to acknowledge the complexity of what happened. And in trying to acknowledge the complexity is not trying to deny what happened or trying to justify what happened. It's an attempt to learn more comprehensively. So
it's not historical revisionism?
No, it's not. It's historical revisionism to say that you cannot say what Verwoerd's intention was.
Y'all gon' make me lose my mind. Up in here, up in here. Y'all gon' make me go all out. Up in here.
The 1913 Native Land Act made it illegal for black people to own land in South Africa.
No.
There remains an historical injustice in South Africa.
That's not true.
Based on land.
That's not true.
How is it true?
Did you read the 1913 Land Act?
Indeed.
The 1913 Land Act said that there were certain sections in which only white people are allowed to own property, and certain sections in which only black people were allowed to own property. It's not true that the 1913 Land Act made it impossible or said no black person is allowed to own property. That's not true.
Move, bitch, get out the way. Get out the way, bitch, get out the way. Move, bitch, get out the way. Get out the way, bitch.
Was put together by a white government to look at the state of land affairs in South Africa in the early 20th century. It was put together by white people, executed by white people. Some may argue for white purposes. So how can you argue almost 100 years, over 100 years from the fact that this wasn't subjugation of black people by white people, even before there was a legalized system called apartheid?
Well, I'm not sure what the point is about the Bauer Commission. I don't know who was on, I don't know what the race was of the people, but let's assume they were white. Why? I'm not sure what the argument there is.
I don't fuck with you. You little stupid ass bitch, I ain't fucking with you. You little
Why are we even discussing the legacy of Verwoerd? I thought it was just generally accepted that Hendrik Verwoerd was the architect of apartheid and had implemented a system that subjugated black people.
There are some politicians across the globe, and particularly in South Africa, who are very, I shouldn't say very, but who are easier to understand. And then there are some who are much more complicated. Now, Thabo Mbeki was a very complicated person. And I think we should point out, for example, as atrocious as Thabo Mbeki's policy on HIV/AIDS was, it was complicated. He had some complicated things going on in his head when he made certain decisions in that regard. The same could be said. Hendrik Verwoerd was a very complicated person, if you compare him to others, to other National Party leaders like John Vorster and so forth. And we need to ensure that those injustices that happened are not repeated. And We curtail the lessons that we learn from history if we reduce history to a singular one-dimensional narrative. We will learn more from history if we try to understand from their perspective, and then we try to understand how did this go wrong, and how can we ensure that this doesn't happen again. I think that's what we ought to do.
This the type of shit that we grew up on. The type of shit that killers play in they whip so loud. When shit's about to go down, so lanes get the fuck on. Animals on the loose. You should have left.
As a final question I ask for you then, will you accept that apartheid was declared a crime against humanity by the UN, and as such that should be our departure point, not a fact that maybe it was a complicated concept introduced during a complicated time by a very complex man?
Well, AfriForum has never denied that apartheid was declared a crime against humanity by the UN. It was declared a crime against humanity. AfriForum has come under criticism for expressing concern that the definition of a crime against humanity is not applied consistently, that it is argued today that communism is not a crime against humanity, despite the fact that it killed 100 million people. So, yes, it was declared a crime against humanity, and we shouldn't go back to
surely,
apartheid.
though, I mean, consistently
trying
trying to place apartheid within the context of a global reading of communism is just whataboutery.
Why is this whataboutery? Communism was a reality in South Africa as well. It's not whataboutery to ask for consistency. To ask for consistency in the application of certain definitions, and that's the problem that we have in South Africa, and that's a problem that we have with a perspective or an evaluation of history in South Africa. We need to point out what happened, and we need to point out that those were injustices, and those injustices have to be corrected. But if that's the end of the story, and you're not allowed to say anything other than that, then we are curtailing the lessons that we learn from history.
Give me my money in stacks and lace my bitches with dime figures. Real niggas' fingers on nickel-plated non-triggers. Must see my enemies defeated. I catch them while they coked up and weeded open fire.